So we're finally into our topic. So socialization. Have a think back to what do you remember about the topic of socialization? So what is the difference between primary and secondary socialization? This was the content descriptor that we looked at as an example, and it said we needed to be able to explain the difference. So we need to have a think about the difference. What does this picture make you think of, for example? What about this one? How could these pictures potentially be different? So, like I said, the syllabus says we need to be able to explain the difference between primary and secondary socialization. So our first question we're probably thinking is, what actually is socialization? So socialization is the process by which an individual learns the customs, norms, and beliefs of a group or society, which provides them with the necessary skills for participating in that group. So a few key words there. The first one I would say would probably be learns. So socialization, it's almost a learning process, you would say, because that is what we said here. It's the process by which somebody is actually learning. So these aren't things that these aren't necessarily things that might be innate for us as people, and they might be things that different people learn differently from different settings. So the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that it's a learning process. And what are you learning? Well, you could say that we're learning the norms and beliefs of a group or society, and then that then provides them with the necessary skills for participating in that group. So you could think of it, for example, like learning social skills or learning your cultural values and traditions. There's different kind of things that we learn when we're part of a group. So primary socialization occurs early in a child's life, when they learn the attitudes, traditions, and values of a group. And that's usually from close family. So on that first slide, when I showed you those pictures, the first one was a man holding a baby. So that would be an example of primary socialization. So that child, especially as they grow up in their first few years of life, they will learn the attitudes, traditions, and values of that group. And in this case, that group is referring to their close family. So, question. So, what did you learn was normal as a child? An example from my family would be how we celebrated Christmas every single year. So we'd wake up every morning and then we would open presents together as a family. We'd have breakfast. We'd all go to church together. And then we'd usually do either a big lunch or dinner with extended family if it was possible. So those were the traditions that I learned were normal for Christmas. But not every family does celebrate Christmas in that way. But that was just what I learned was normal from my upbringing. And so moving on to secondary socialization, and that's where an individual learns the customs, behaviors, and beliefs of a group beyond the immediate family unit. So examples of secondary socialization agents could be, for example, teachers, your extended family, social media, and other sources. And the important thing to note is that these secondary socialization agents become increasingly important as we get older. So when a child's younger, they oftentimes spend most of their time at home with their family. Obviously, that's not the case in everyone's upbringing. But quite typically when a child is quite young, they spend most of their time with their family, and so they are doing most of that learning in that setting. So they might learn what are the typical gender roles that they might see in their mum and their dad. They might learn about cultural traditions, religious traditions, and all of those kind of things from their family. But as they grow up and venture further beyond the home, they might start to learn different attitudes, different values, different beliefs, and different traditions. And the important thing to remember with this is that we're not asking, is primary or secondary socialization better or worse? We're not asking which is better or worse, but both can be for better or worse, because psychology is not straightforward. It's like if we link back to what you might have kind of learned last year in psychology. Think about the nature versus nurture debate. There's all of these different factors that can influence a child's growth and development, and it is very complicated and not straightforward because neither are people. So, for example, if a child is raised in an abusive home, that is going to have a very their primary socialization is going to have a very strong negative effect on their life, because they're going to be learning that violent and abusive language and actions are acceptable behavior. And then that, as they grow up, they might then themselves begin to express those attitudes and behaviors. Or an example of a negative secondary socialization influence would be a child might be raised in a really good home, but they might make some friends at school who might encourage them to participate in smoking. And then that wider influence is then having a negative effect on them. Social media is also a really interesting secondary socialization agent, because children can explore and have access to so many things online now, which again can be for better or worse. So you can kind of see how primary and secondary socialization plays a different role in children's lives, especially depending on their age.